Welcome back, everyone. It's been a very long time since I've followed up this video, a vinyl collection update. So what I've decided to do is I'm just gonna start from scratch and I'm gonna record the two-parters tonight. So I'm gonna upload them in separate pieces, so that way it's not going to be one bloated, possibly 2-hour video. I'm gonna try to keep this as minimal as possible. I do have one crate over here. Keep in mind, this isn't even half of the collection. There's a ton more still up there that some were covered in the previous video, some were not. So I decided there's so much that's been added to my collection ever since I did the video. I think honestly, it's been 7 months since I uploaded that video. So I decided I'm just gonna start over. So there is going to be edits. This is going to be the first part. This is going to be the first crate. So when if you're looking for part 2, that is going to be uploaded later on into the week, maybe into next week. So without further ado, I'm just going to get started because we have a lot to go through. I'm going to recommend all of these albums. If you see one that you're very interested in, just give a comment down below. I can give you some more information, and we're just going to get started. Now, conveniently enough, this is the vinyl that started the video from last time. And I forgot to take the sleeve off of it, of course. This is Future's Evil. Now, recording this video again, I've grown a lot more of appreciation when it comes to Future's music, particularly for The Wizard. That's an album I have to pick up still on vinyl. But this vinyl itself, I like how concise and how trim this album is for Future. It has incredible songs on it. It's got Ain't No Time. It's got, of course, Low Life of the Weeknd. It's got amazing tracks on it. It's a very trim track list, so you can get through this. I believe it's in 30 to 35 minutes. Overall, just great listen. It's a black sleeve, so that's a little bit different. Usually you see this with the Schoolboy Q release. And what I like about this one, it is a record store day purchase exclusive. I know they are still prevalent, but it's really hard to find, I think, in Canada. But I believe the color of this pressing is a red smoke black splatter. So you do see a little bit through the record, and as you're spinning it through, it actually looks very nice. It kind of swooshes around as the record player spins around and around and around. So it's a great album. It's actually a good place to start with Future. I think it gives you an idea of what modern Future really sounds like. So if you are looking for a nice starter to get into the collection or get into a little bit of trap in general, and of course Future, I highly recommend Evil. Very highly recommend it. Again, just started getting more into Future as I went along. Now this will be a new one to the video that I didn't do last time, and it's going to be reversed, but this is Denzel Curry's Taboo. Really great pressing here. I got this a long time ago, and it's got all the sides represented onto it. This is one of my favorite album covers ever, by the way. I love all the details. I love how menacing it is. I love how mysterious it is. It really encapsulates the sound, particularly on the gray side and the dark side. And you have the light side represented. So you have all 3 sides represented. And on this thing, I can't think of so many tracks. Super Saiyan Superman, switch it up. Sirens, of course. Clout Cobain. This album is honestly immaculate. I don't know if Melt My Eyes, See Your Future or this is better. I'm probably going to go with this for now, but I'll give it time. And it's good to keep the red theme going because I believe this is called Red Slushy. So you do have a little bit of white accents onto it. You have more of the splatters going on, but this is a very nice looking pressing. Again, it looks really nice spinning on the vinyl. And it does sound particularly nice. The bass in particular, it does sound heavy, it does sound full. So Denzel Curry's Taboo, I think it's very easy to get across in the States. I think it's only like 15 bucks. So if you get the chance, I highly recommend you going to pick this up. And I do know in particular that there is the picture disc version. I did not get that for obvious reasons. I'm not really well versed in picture discs. I don't know how they work. So maybe with Melt My Eyes, maybe I'll find the picture disc at a cheaper cost. So I'm going to put that back there, Denzel Curry's Taboo. And we're going to keep on going. This one did show up in the last video, and this is King's Kaleidoscope's Beyond Control. This is, I guess I would say, a Christian indie artist. They are particularly low-key, but if you have the common connotations of what Christian contemporary music is and worship music and all that stuff, this kind of flips it on its side, that it sounds incredibly extravagant. You do have the full orchestra. You have all these intricate pieces woven through this incredible experience, and the album cover sounds exactly what you think the music would be like. It's extravagant, it's ethereal, it's just a masterwork when it comes to everything just coming together. And this is probably some of my favorite packaging of any vinyl that I have. And I'm going to give you just a look at all of these things. And I showed this before, but I just love showing this thing. You do have some of the biblical imagery, that's the Tower of Babel. And each pressing is so immaculate, it's so gorgeous. I don't know if this is pressed anymore, but this is the first part. This is probably my favorite side, that it has the bronze, it has the white, and has a little bit of these red accents that flood over into this side. So if you look at how amazing this pressing is, this is so unique. And it sounds immaculate on vinyl as well. So that's the first one, and I can't describe to you how much this record means to me. It's one of my favorite records ever. This has got me through some really tough times, in particular for the past couple of years. When I discovered that this band and this record existed, this has gone through many portions of my life, just going from college to getting married to doing all this kind of stuff. It has meant the world to me, and I can't thank this record enough for existing. And now we'll get to the second side here, which I believe this is the story of David and Goliath. Really amazing kind of older imagery that you would see like in some, I guess, either classical paintings and all this kind of stuff. This is a 3-sided LP, by the way. So the front has got more of the bronze down below, and it's got more of this like Arctic splatter. You'll see an Arctic splatter record later on, but this side has no grooves on it whatsoever, so it's not really meant to be played. It's just more of like a show-off piece. But yeah, incredible songs on this. Everything is immaculately produced. I can't wait for the newest album. I think it's going to be coming either in August or September. I have to get their other pressings and all that stuff, but these are incredibly hard to find. They don't press these albums that often. You have to, once they show up, you have to get these immediately, because again, they do very limited runs on these albums, and you have to jump at the opportunity to get it before it's too late. But King's Kaleidoscope, Beyond Control. If I was to recommend one track, goodness, I would say Lost is one, and there is A Prayer. A Prayer is a beautiful track, and it really talks about how someone is going through a struggle, and it's a two-parter where it's just one part is kind of crying out in like pain and suffering, and the other is like the response when it comes to the faith part of it, the spiritual part, responding to this pain that's being brought forth by the character in the story or whatever. I think the contrast of it is beautiful, and the second part just explodes in this extravagant strings and extravagant horns, and the singing is not really like what you call technically good singing. It's more of like shouting, but it's like proclaiming, and it's such a cool contrast. So I recommend that song more than enough. I can talk about this album for the entire video, but I have to keep moving on because there is a lot to go through. Now I was gonna make the part 2 when I got this Dawn FM Special Edition vinyl. I love this album. It's probably my favorite album of this year. I believe it's a number 2, number 3 of my albums of the decade already. I didn't get the one. I know there is one where this kind of face is gone, and it's more of like a focus on this more orange aspect of the cover. But I do like the face of it, and you do get some more starry backgrounds. And I'll open up some more. You get this. This is really nice. It is just a standard white sleeve black vinyl, if I'm not mistaken. Just going to double check. Oh, no, it's a black. So it's a black sleeve. And it does have a little bit of the plastic coating inside of it, which is nice because it helps to prevent the record from scratching over periods of time when you're sliding in and out of the sleeve. But if you go into there, there's just this nice, vast orange kind of landscape of clouds and more of the face there. A really amazing pressing. I'm so glad I finally got this. This took, my goodness, it took must have been 4 to 5 months to finally get this. I bought the CD version of it. I was going to buy the original version where it just had Uncle Abel onto it, but I knew this was coming, so I was just like, you know what, I'm going to hold off. If I do get the base edition, that's probably honestly going to get framed because I think that album cover is iconic and this album as a whole is iconic. I take this over After Hours, which is quite a bold statement, but I love the story and the moral that this thing has. It actually resonated with me a lot when I first listened to it, especially when you get to Phantom Regret by Jim. It actually made me really reminisce and think about the past things in my life, of things I have to let go, of things I have to reconsider and think about. So it's a really cool thing that one of the greatest artists in the world, one of the most prominent artists of our generation, is able to strike a chord with me on such a personal level, where I honestly didn't expect The Weeknd to do that, because of course it's a lot of relationship kind of stuff, and of course I relate to that as well. But I think having the abilities for The Weeknd and able to step out of that and focus on something more broader in scope, I think is something that is very good for his career, and I think that's going to push it to the next level. So Dawn FM, incredible album, can't recommend it enough. Another new one I got, J. Cole's The Off Season. Such a great listen, probably because there's 2014 Forest Hills Drive, there's For Your Eyes Only, KOD is on the lower end. This is definitely on the upper half of his discography, mostly because this is like a pure rap album. And 2014 was kind of a pure rap album, but this one is much more ground roots hip hop, but it's more revolutionized for the 2020s. And I think this album has incredible bangers. It has the introspection when you think of Let Go of My Hand, when you think of the Climb Back and all this kind of stuff. I really appreciate this record, and it's such a fun time to listen to. If you're really looking for something, if you are like in the state where it's just like, I don't know what to listen to, this is something you can easily throw on and you're going to enjoy it every single time. So you still got the fire going on inside of the sleeves there, and you got all the production credits across each little bit here. My favorite track is honestly Amari. I love the melodic performances. I think J. Cole has stepped up very melodically on this album, where if you think of contrast with KOD and the songs with Kill Edward, it's not the greatest. I'm not the biggest fan of the Kill Edward parts, but I think the vocal inflections and melodies that J. Cole hits on this album is so much better executed. There's Interlude, there's 95 South. There's so many incredible tracks. That track, My Life, Pride is the Devil, I could go on, but another great release. I think this album is going to age incredibly well across this entire decade. So let's get to the next one. We are going through these actually relatively quickly. I kept the sleeve for this one because this is a Bandcamp release. This is Napoleon the G, or Napoleon the Legend, and this is called Dragon Ball G. So this whole album, it doesn't sample Dragon Ball Z, but there's a lot of Dragon Ball inspirations and references that are laced through this entire album. And what I really appreciate is that it is a smaller artist, a smaller release. So I'll give you a little bit of that. It gives this nice little message just saying thank you for purchasing the album. So it says, Peace Brandon, which is my name, salute, love is love, Napoleon the Legend. And that's such a nice, cool detail, especially for something that's more of low-key indie. I love having the ability of having that interaction with an artist. And he's given a bunch of stickers. Let me just show these off. So Napoleon the Legend stickers. There's a couple more here. Just more of smaller stickers. I don't know if I'm gonna put these on the computer or not, because I have the back of my laptop's absolutely full of them. But I have Napoleon the Legend's more stickers. There's a ton of stuff to this thing, and I really appreciate it. So this is a really good album. It's a nice kind of grassroots kind of hip hop. It has some really nice features on it. It is not on streaming services, but if you do want to listen to it, I recommend purchasing it. Give artists like the $5, $10 on Bandcamp that they deserve, because I love the approach of Bandcamp where it's a lot more independent. There's a lot more of growth to that thing, even though I believe it was Epic Games that purchased Bandcamp. I hope that doesn't ruin the integrity of a Bandcamp, but I think you should 100%, if none of these albums are on streaming, at least go listen to them on Bandcamp and give them a little bit extra money, because they really do need it to really boost their growth. And I think Napoleon the Legend does deserve it. And I just showed you how much I got for just purchasing an album. And my favorite part, of course, is Dragon Ball Z. So you have to do the Dragon Ball Z yellow, and it looks, or orange, the Dragon Ball Z orange. It looks so nice. The record is actually very heavy. So I haven't spun this yet. I have so many records to spin still. You can tell that I buy stuff and I still don't spin it. So if you're looking for kind of more traditional hip hop, I heavily recommend that you go listen to this album here, Napoleon the Legend, Dragon Ball G. Great album. Really great album. Keep it going here. JRock's Redemption. So I wish 90059 was on pressing. That's probably my favorite JRock album, but this is more of a crossover attempt. You got Win. I believe you have King's Dead on here. You have Knock It Off. You have Out of Sight, Out of Mind. King's Freestyle, I believe it is. I love this album. I think the crossover attempts that it has, I think, are executed very well. JRock does very well on radio singles, I've realized, especially going through this entire album. I think he executes kind of the radio sound and mainstream sound incredibly well, and this is a great example of it. There's so many great songs on here, and it really encapsulates a lot of moods. You got some more pictures alongside of it. The back cover is kind of the same thing. So not really much to add on to this record pressing. There's nothing really special about it, but overall it's just a great album. It's also very cheap. I think I only got this even for Canadian. This was only like $20. So if you're looking for a kind of a nice record starter that's not going to break the bank, I can only imagine how much this is in the US. It's probably particularly cheap. So JRock Redemption, great album, great listen. Man on the Moon 2. This is my favorite Man on the Moon out of all of them. I do really like Man on the Moon 3, and I haven't really given a lot of time to Man on the Moon 1. I'm just starting to get into the Man on the Moon series now. But I remember listening to this for the first time, and actually, this is when Kids See Ghosts came out, and I figured, it's like, I'll just scale back and I'll go listen to some Kid Cudi. And I love the sound of all of these songs. There's Don't Play This Song, there's Marijuana, there's Revofev. Revofev is probably my favorite song in the album. Scott Muscuddy versus the World. You got Erase Me. There's so many great songs on here, and it's a great vibe. I really like Cudi's sound, and yeah, just kind of like horror movie kind of imagery inside of the album here. I think it's just standard white sleeve black vinyl, but knowing Kid Cudi, I believe that this pressing is probably heavier, and it's probably going to sound quite immaculate once I actually give it a spin. So that's a common thing I'm going to do, is that I haven't spun a decent bit of these because I work a lot. I don't have a lot of time to really sit down and dedicate some time to listening to these things. But I'll definitely say I have an incredible collection. So Kid Cudi, Man on the Moon 2. Next one we have here. This is, you're going to see a little bit of reflection here. This is Clipping, Splendor and Misery. I was hoping to get There Existed Addiction to Blood and Visions of Bodies Being Burned. Those two albums, like, coinciding with each other, are incredible kind of avant-garde, horrorcore kind of hip-hop albums. What I love about this album is the concept. It really sticks with the concept, and I'll give you a general idea what the concept is. It is kind of a stowaway or a person on a slave ship, and the way to describe it is that he's on the ship, he's growing insane to the point where he's falling in love with the ship itself. That's the best thing I can describe it with. The only explanation I could say that allow you to dive further and to recognize what I'm talking about is to go listen. If you get an idea of it, I didn't realize this until I saw a comment. The spacesuit is fully intact once you're in kind of this triangle, which may mean the spaceship. But once you actually get outside of it, there's the chains and like the slave thing. So there's nice little subtle details here, and it has really like kind of, I don't know how to describe it. It does have kind of Apollo kind of energy to it, where it gives an idea of all the tracks and all this kind of stuff. On the inside, you can't really see it. I may be able to show it, but there's actually like a solar system, stars. Oh, there we go. So you got the stars in the solar system. Of course, this spaceship is flying through just, it's a vacant spaceship. It's abandoned, so they're just flying through nothing. But it's just standard black vinyl. But Clipping is one of my favorite collabs, my favorite rap duos and all this kind of stuff of all time. I think that Daveed Diggs' rap ability is underrated and understated. One of the most skilled rappers of our generation, and the production on this is absolutely incredible. Especially if you go to the next albums, like the two other people that work alongside this project have worked in movies before. So you get to hear the grandiose sound. It sounds like an IMAX movie put onto an album. and you have David Diggs kind of narrating the whole way through. So highly recommend clipping Splendor and Misery in all their catalog, even their self-titled, which is getting harder to find. This one is a little bit of a record builder, but this is kind of special because this is Striper. I believe this is Isaiah 53 verse 5. So if you grew up with Metallica, if you grew up with Iron Maiden, if you grew up with Judas Priest, when you were a pastor, or a pastor's kid in particular, your equivalents are Petra, you may not know who that is, or Striper. So these are classic rock bands. They are very carrying along with the yellow kind of aesthetic. I'm going to show you the back cover of this. And just looking at it now, this is definitely very 80s. There's a guy with two katanas. The hair metal is out of control. And I haven't listened to this, but I appreciate my father giving me a little bit of a taste of what he listened to in probably the 80s or 90s, because my music taste is so vastly different. And to have this in my library is to show a contrast of how my music taste is so incredibly different than my whole family in particular. So I haven't heard a track of this yet. I may give it a spin tonight just for the fun of it. But Striper, Isaiah 53 verse 5. I'm going to have to look that verse up afterwards, but it's fun. I'll definitely say it's fun. There is a couple of records in here that I kind of classify as record builders, which basically means that while I may not listen to them all the time, it does bulk up the collection, and it also does allow for nice spacers, so where all the records are not getting like warped as they're kind of leaning up against each other. That's the kind of thing there. This is a newer pickup that I've had. Birds in the Trap, Sig McKnight by Travis Scott. This completes my Travis Scott collection. I have every single Travis release besides Jack Boys. I know Jack Boys does have a pressing. And of course, hopefully Utopia does have a pressing at some point. There's so many iconic songs on here. There's Goosebumps. There's Way Back. Sweet Sweet's one of my favorite Travis Scott songs, period. There's Through the Late Night. There's Guidance. There's so many I can just keep going through. Travis has an incredible discography. It's untouchable at this point. And you get a little more imagery on the back, which is really nice. And I believe there's a little bit more imagery on here. Oh yeah, so you get a little bit of like stage kind of presence energy, which is really cool. And I'll show this other one here. And it has kind of more of like the magazine writings you would see, like, I guess, from Murderer Manifestos and all that kind of stuff, which is a cool aesthetic to go for, especially when you're Travis Scott. So Birds in the Trap, Sig McKnight, probably the weakest when it comes to the albums as a whole, but still, it's like an 8 or 9 out of 10 album. I can't really... Travis's discography is just timeless, and there's nothing wrong with it. I can't really think of any kind of tarnishing to it besides the stuff, of course, that happened with Astrofest. This record took almost 2 years to get to my door. I remember I was messaging people, and people are asking me, it's just like, where is that record? And I said... When COVID happened, they said shipping was completely and pressings were completely on hold. The pressing of this didn't start until maybe March of this year. This album came out last year, like very early into last year. And this is underscores with Fishmonger. Got a little bit of the fish idea going on there. So this is hyperpop. This is a hyperpop sound. I will say, though, that it is quite palatable and it is quite easy to and quite accessible to get into. I'm not going to say that this is a standoffish record, something that you can just jump into and think it's just like, I'm never going to listen to this ever again. This is something, if you are looking to dive into a genre and not like fully like dive into the pool that is hypertrap, I think this is a hyperpop in particular. I think this album is a great start. It has so many great tracks on it. 70%, Secondhand Embarrassment. Your Favorite Sidekick is my favorite one. The bass on it, the kicks on it, the melodies on it, the high-pitched kind of melodies that are going through across this thing are such ear candy. And I don't know why. I didn't picture myself loving the sound of hyper pop and hyper trap in particular, but this album does it for me. And the other cool thing, you got more of like kind of like a cartoonish look inside of it, which is actually pretty cool. A little bit more minute details into there. And of course, the pressing of it, if I can get it out, of course, is a very nice, kind of like an ocean blue. It's a kind of like you can kind of see through it a little bit. It showed this record as a much more pale kind of blue. But when I actually saw it and actually got the pressing in, I'm kind of happy that it's a darker blue, because I think the darker blue is a really nice look to this record. So that is Fishmonger. Again, it took such a long time for this to show up to my house, but I'm very happy that I got it. I'm very happy that I finally am able to spin it, because this is one of my favorite records of last year. Maybe one of my favorites of the decade. I may have to put this on my decade list, because every time I do return to this, it's a very fun listen. And I also love the album cover. I don't know why, but that just brings me such a happy smile. It brings me some nostalgia when I kind of had this fascination with water towers and all this kind of stuff. So cool. I really like that. Keep it going here. This was from my previous video. Schoolboy Q's Crash Talk. I almost said Trash Talk. Probably my favorite Schoolboy Q release. I appreciate the ability that he took to mellow it out a little bit after Blank Face, which was an incredible ride, incredibly visceral sounding. I really appreciate the ability to kind of tone it back, really start to be more introspective when it comes to fame, when it comes to wealth, when it comes to the situations that occurred in Schoolboy Q's life when this record was being created. And you get a little bit of an idea of it once I actually open up the gatefold. But you get that yellow kind of, pastel yellow kind of look that goes across here. You have songs like Tails, you have Gang Gang, you have Floating, you have Dangerous, Drunk. There's so many great songs on this thing. It's a very underrated release from TDE in general. My favorite part, however, is that there's two messages in here. So, of course, you do have the track listings here of all the credits and all the kind of stuff in here. But in the top corner up here, I'm not going to be able to... I may read one of them at least, but the top one is for Mac and the bottom one is for Nipsey Hussle. So I appreciate that this record here does have little mementos towards two artists, especially Mac, that meant a lot to him. So I'll read the Mac one to you. So this goes number 2, Mac. A song or an interview won't explain how much of a brother you was. Love you, and our last convo was all I needed. Thanks for everything. So just a small little message, but that honestly gets me very emotional. So I'm going to move on for this before I start crying, but great album. One of my favorite albums from the TDE camp. I can't recommend it enough. Another great add-on to my collection is Views. I used to hate this album. I used to think that this is bottom tier Drake. I used to think that the whole album was a bloated mess. But I guess, as Drake said when it came to Honestly Nevermind, I still don't like that album, by the way. We'll wait for you to catch up. So I caught up, and I think Views is an incredibly cohesive listen. I think it's built up very nicely. You get every single sound that Drake has kind of mastered over this time. It comes together so nicely across this album. While I think that If You're Reading This Is Too Late encapsulates the sound of Toronto more, I think having this album and the cover and all this kind of stuff, it does resemble kind of the sound that Canada has, where it goes from winter, goes to summer, then goes back to winter. So cool. Really amazing album. Western Road Flows, Hype, With You is one of my favorites. Feel No Ways. There's so many incredible songs on here. Some of top 10 Drake on this album in general. The Closer is one of my favorite closers from Drake, and also the opener, one of my favorite openers as well. And we'll give you a little bit of a taste of it. We get the duck face of Drake just overlooking, I'm assuming that's kind of the Toronto skyline. Really nice stuff here. Got all the production credits here, and just the standard sleeve black vinyl. Great album. I need to pick up some more Drake. I'm seeing If You're Reading This Is Too Late is getting more prevalent in Canada, and it's not as expensive, because I remember the last time I looked and I was going to purchase it, it was going to cost around like $90 to $120. So I definitely don't have the money for that. So I'm glad that it's starting to show up again. So this is a newer one as well. This is El Camino, Let There Be Light. This is a Buffalo-based rapper. He is not on the Griselda label, but he is heavily tied to Griselda. There's Griselda features that he's done multiple projects with. This individual releases like 6 to 7 albums a year. And this one was the one that caught my interest the most. And what I really appreciate about this is that I've listened to El Camino a little bit. But what I like about this album is that there's finally a little bit of more personal content onto this album. You hear it laced throughout this entire album. This is his most personal that I've listened to so far. When you think of songs like Who I Am, Won't Show It, all this kind of stuff here. There's even like a fun little thing where he's discussing it's on James Brown actually, where he's talking about is like, I'm the equivalent of James Brown, like in my city, even though I'm not going to have like nearly as much impact of this person, so it's like I have an impact. And that's really cool little realization that is just like, I may not be the biggest artist in the world, but I do have a level of impact, and I really appreciate that. So this album, if you're really into Griselda, if you're in Westside Gunn, Conway, Benny, Boldy, all this kind of stuff, there is a Currency feature on here. There's Keisha Plum, which is heavily featured on a lot of Westside Gunn albums. You would really like this album. The bonus track in particular, Rude, is probably one of the best bangers of this year. I wish I could play it for you, but go listen to it for yourself. Another cool parts of it, if you look there, it's going to be hard to see, but that says 91 out of 160. So this is a very, very, very limited pressing. And of course I can't get the Westside Gunn ones because everyone cops them immediately. But it's almost like this is like a playing card. And it has like literally a seal of approval. It's like, yo, like this is an actual pressing of only like 160 out there. Last little thing that I like about this record as well is that it is glow in the dark. Now, it doesn't glow as much as you think it would. It's actually a very faint glow. But I can understand that it's a Bandcamp release. But when I do turn on off all the lights, I can't get it on the camera, of course. But you do see it spin a little bit, and it kind of has like the slime kind of look to it. So it's a really cool like thing to add on to it. And there was a couple of pressings, but I really gravitated towards, of course, the glow in the dark, because I was hoping to get the Billie Eilish record in a glow in the dark pressing, but those are getting harder to find. So El Camino, Let There Be Light, really good, like some old school rap, Buffalo rap, all this kind of stuff. Really good record. We are getting closer towards the end. So this is another Bandcamp drop from this year. This is Wilm of Reach. I don't even know how I'm going to pronounce this. Wilm of Reach, I believe that's how you pronounce it. This is an album called Grotto. This is like a jazz rap, jazz hop kind of sound. The rapping on it is really interesting. It sounds kind of woozy and it sounds kind of downtrodden. It's not kind of your typical rap album. It sounds really interesting. And you can see kind of this cavernous kind of picture with this random Thomas the Tank looking ass just going through this cavern. But the cavern itself is actually a very good kind of imagery for this album and how it sounds. It does sound quite cavernous. It sounds like the color. It sounds very blue. And it's a very nice album. It goes through well. It's a very cohesive listen. If you're looking for a great album to do homework to even just for a late night drive, honestly, this is a great listen. And what I appreciate about this record, I love Bandcamp releases now, because their pressings are so interesting that it is, look at that. I haven't looked at this in a while, but there's like this blue that's kind of going there, but then there's like the splatter of red. There's the darker red going along the ridge, and then this side has more of the blue. That's just so beautiful. And I've spun it before. It sounds immaculate. So I wish I had their other album as well. I believe it's called Bird. The cover arts on these two are incredible. So if you're looking for some more abstract kind of hip hop, something a little bit out of the lane that you would kind of see in a lot of hip hop releases, I recommend Wilm of Reach, like all of their discography. There's only 2 albums they've had so far, but I heavily recommend this pressing and this release in particular. Give some Bandcamp artists some love, because they put a lot of effort into this. I really recommend you go into like Bandcamp and just search up a particular album and see if you really like it. And if you do, just go grab a physical copy, because they put a lot of effort into this stuff, and I really appreciate that. And that's why I love to give back to artists. I think it's such a cool thing. Just when I thought I wasn't going to get emotional, Circles by Mac. I am in that stage where I am much more comfortable listening to Mac Miller. I remember, I think it was a video from a long time ago on my channel saying that I love Mac. Mac is my #1 rapper of all time, but I was in the stage where every time I would listen to it, I would feel uncomfortable knowing it's just like, dang, I'm not going to get music from this guy anymore. But I have this, and I've gone back to love every single Mac release. And I'm so glad we have got to end off with this technically. Of course, we've had the mixtape that just released, and we had Faces. But I'm so glad that this came out the way that it did, how finished it is, how fully realized this is, how it perfectly ties into the Swimming with Circles sounds. It's just, I'm so happy with how this came out. It does have a full-on poster. I'm not gonna, of course, show it because it is going to go across my entire phone. We're not gonna be able to see it, but the thing is incredible. I'm gonna need to find a place to put it up. And I don't know why, I always have this affinity of getting clear pressings, but that's like really clear. That's probably the most clear pressing I've ever seen. It's so transparent that you can literally see a little bit more details. You can see my eyes right now through this. But this album as a whole, it's such an incredible send-off to probably my most influential artist of all time. When I've recorded music, when I do record music, Mac is an incredible inspiration. The way he raps, the way he talks about stories, the way he does things, everything I emulate, it all comes back to Mac. So rest in peace, Mac Miller. I do have Watching Movies with the Sound Off. It's framed over there. You're not going to see it, but that's my first rap album ever. And when I discovered it back in 2013, Mac Miller just blew my mind of what hip-hop and what music in general could sound like. So I have so much to thank when it comes to Mac Miller, when it comes to music, when it comes to discovery, when it comes to everything. Like, throughout my entire life, there has been albums from Mac that have perfectly encapsulated every single point in my life. So I'm so thankful that I have a connection to an artist like that. So many people have this ability to have a connection with one artist that they've been able to live kind of through this artist their entire life. And I'm so happy that I have the ability to do that with Mac Miller. Incredible stuff. Now we are on to Astroworld. I'm starting to like this more than Rodeo. I am not going to front with you. This album is perfectly crafted. Travis is such an amazing curator and director of everything that goes into his albums. All the features are placed perfectly. The sounds that are so into the universe of the album, but it sounds different enough where everything is so engaging and interesting. Astroworld does that. Stargazing, Sicko Mode, Carousel. Carousel is like a top 5 Travis song for me. Coffee Bean, Astro Thunder. Can't say. I could go on for hours and hours and hours about how amazing and how well crafted this album is. I realize this isn't a gatefold, but you do get the alternative covers in here. I got a little bit of booty going on there. I believe these were taken off, if I'm not mistaken. I remember when this album dropped, and there was the day and night version of Astroworld, but this was taken off to, I believe, one of the artists or one of the models in this cover. I believe it's the one kind of in the glass box down there. And I remember Travis saying it's just like, wait for the physicals to come out. So it's nice to get a little bit of inclusion there. It adds to the experience of the day and night sound this has. It does sound quite bright, but then it also sounds quite bleak and dark for the sound that it is. I can think, if I was to think of a sound for like the dark version, I can think of like 5% Tint. I can think of NC-17. I can think of Skeletons. All of it just perfectly matches that late night sound, and there's like no bystanders could match the day sound. There's so many cool stuff. There's everything about this is very particularly crafted, and even like the record itself and stuff, like it sounds amazing. Very happy with this pressing. I'm so happy I have every single Travis Scott pressing. Finally, we get on to some Tyler. Finally, this dropped. It took so long, but I'm so happy when Amazon put these finally up to purchase. It was the #1 selling thing at the time. And I believe this vinyl pressing in particular boosted, I think, the album to almost #1 again. Call Me If You Get Lost, one of my favorite records of last year. Tyler is on this incredible run when you think of Flower Boy, when you think of Igor, and when you think of this. I can only imagine if Tyler drops another classic album, because I think this will go down as a classic of the 2020s in my opinion. If he drops another album, he may be top 5 in my conversation of hip-hop artists ever. Because I also grew up, I kind of listened to Tyler along the same with Mac. I listened to Wolf, and I kind of grew on from there. it was a very interesting relationship with Tyler the Creator, because I didn't like Cherry Bomb at all, and then Flower Boy was a reintroduction almost, and it's really cool to have along with this journey as well. You get like the 60s kind of look to across the whole album. It is damaged. That's fine. I honestly don't really care about damage as long as it doesn't inherently ruin the record experience, like listening. You get the postcard, the ODB kind of influences, and I don't think there's anything special about the pressings. No, I don't think so. I think it's just a white sleeve black vinyl, but glad to finally have Call Me If You Get Lost on vinyl. I do appreciate the alternate cover. I like this alternate cover more than the Igor alternate cover. Great listen. Of course, you've probably heard Call Me If You Get Lost already. So this one, I have to pull up Google because I have no idea how to pronounce this, but I'm really glad, honestly, that I have it. This is Jeremy Dutcher, and I'm going to try to read this off because this is in a native language. So I apologize if I totally butcher this kind of pronunciation. This is in the language of Wollastock, which I believe only 100 or so people are still talking this language when it comes to Canada. So Wollastock Quiek Lin Tuwa Kawanana. It's very native sounding. This is a classical album. It's a classical sound that Jeremy Dutcher, the person here, he went to the University of Dalhousie, which is in Halifax. I'm from Nova Scotia, so the University of Dalhousie is a very prestigious college when it comes to the Maritimes area. So third year into his music studies, he went into anthropology, and he managed to get the ability to go, I believe it was in one of the Canadian museums, and there was wax cylinders, which the records here are basically the modern equivalent of like wax cylinders. And these wax cylinders that were kept in a museum had these old native singing songs and choruses onto these little wax cylinders. So you can hear these little native chants that have these beautiful melodies to it, and they sound so elegant and gorgeous. And what Jeremy Dutcher did is he took those wax cylinders and he interpreted him through the sound of a modern sense. So you do get the classical pianos, you get the more extravagant sounds that you would hear from more classical albums. And he integrates the sound of the language that he kind of wasn't able to learn at the time, which is Wollastock, which I believe, I don't know where the native language comes from. I don't know where particular region it is. But this album, if I was to make a description, if you've ever played the Civilization games and you have the background music that sounds quite grandiose and quite beautiful, this is like Civilization background music, and it sounds so triumphant. It sounds absolutely haunting, especially when you get the samples of the wax cylinders of the Wollastock people singing these choruses and chants. So you do get, and I was reading about this too, this is the perspective of the person, and this is the perspective of him when he was going to anthropology. Really interesting stuff. And the pronunciations of all this stuff is Indian. I can't figure out, I don't know how to look this up. I guess it's such a really hard language to really decipher and figure out personally. But you do get some more imagery here. My favorite track is definitely the first one. If you want to give just one track in particular a listen, I believe it's Meshanut. I don't know how I'm pronouncing all this stuff, but that's an amazing listen, and it carries on that kind of brownish look that you saw on the cover. It's almost like a purple. So you got the purple on this side, you got the purple on this side. There's a little bit of blue accents. I haven't spun this yet, but I'll be very happy when I'm able to spin it, because the album itself is so incredibly made. This won a Polaris Prize, I believe it was in 2018 or 2019. He hasn't made another album since, but I really hope he does, and whether it's going to be a carry-on to a more conceptual sound that he was carrying on before. But the ability to get these indigenous recordings and to put them into a modern scope is something that I find incredibly interesting, and something that, so the fact that you can make it palatable for major audiences, I think is a major win for this album, and a major win for Jeremy Dutcher in general. So give this album a listen. Again, it's Wollastoquiek Lintua Kawara. I don't know. I can't pronounce it correctly. I'm hoping I haven't offended everyone, but incredible album. One of my favorite pickups, honestly, in a very long time. More stuff here. This is Roy Woods. This is Waking at Dawn. This is an OVO artist. He hasn't been putting out a lot of material. I think he's putting out an album, I believe, this year. But I remember when I was listening to Exis back in, I think it was like 2017, 2016 or so. Apologize, the cat is scratching at the door. But this is some nice kind of mellow and kind of low R&B. I'm pulling out this thing almost, the sleeve. But this is a very smooth listen across the whole thing. And if you're looking for kind of the sound along the lines of like a Bryson Tiller and all this kind of stuff, I heavily recommend going to listen to this. I also saw Exis, like the EP. This is another EP, I think. I saw that on vinyl. I was going to pick that up. But this is what it's called, a Cherry Red. So, nice pickup. I haven't listened to this album in a very long time. So I can't really give you an idea of which song is my favorite, because I'll have to go digging to figure out like what was my favorite song. Roy Woods, Waking at Dawn. Then we've got Bon Iver's 22 A Million. I believe it's I. This is one of my favorite albums of all time, just for the sound of it. Folktronica, indie, all this kind of stuff is meshed into this really weird oddity of an album. When you think about where Bon Iver came from, when it came to Bon Iver, kind of the self-titled, the transition into something like this was something that was kind of expected, but wasn't expected to go full on like this album does. It is so noisy, it is so unlistenable, but listenable at the same time, if you understand what I'm getting at. The track titles are really incredibly strange too, and they're kind of put all over this thing. My favorite song is 715 Creeks. For some reason, I love just auto-tune led songs that have no backing instruments and it's just a singing performance. It's kind of like that Imogen Heap song, Hide and Seek. I love the 715 Creek song just for that. There's another song I can think of with Wild Love. It's Cashmere Cat and the Weeknd that does the exact same thing. So this album is super special. I love what it does for Bon Iver's sound and how it expanded it. And it really expanded my listening. I was very challenged by this album, but when I finally got around to appreciating what the album was, it's such an incredible listen. So 22 A Million, one of my favorite albums of all time. And now we've got The Weeknd, Beauty Behind the Madness. This is a harder record to find now, actually, when it comes to Canada. I had to pay kind of a decent penny for this. But it's The Weeknd. I just showed you Dawn FM. This is probably my introduction to The Weeknd. When you think of The Hills, when you think of Go Tell Your Friends, when you think of so many other tracks, In the Night, Can't Feel My Face. This was the major label kind of debut when it came, although it was Kissland, honestly. This was like the breakthrough record to push Abel into the mainstream, and it sounds so nice. I love that it still kind of keeps the sound of the old previous mixtapes, but it does flesh it out and makes it more kind of, I guess, palatable. Even though the sound already was palatable, it makes it more accessible to a lot of first-time listeners to The Weeknd, especially when it came to 2015. A lot of people did know of The Weeknd, but I don't think they gave them a listen. So this was a great opportunity to open up the doors to where we are at this point now, where The Weeknd is probably the biggest artist of our generation at this point. Not a lot to it. There is a lot of stuff inside of here. Again, this is a very hard pressing to find. It's a standard white sleeve black vinyl, but I'm very happy to finally have this in my collection. I need to get After Hours still. That's one that I still need to get sought after. And this is actually the end of the crate. This is Lingua Ignota, Sinner Get Ready. So, when I listened to this album for the first time, it was so terrifying to listen to. I am not going to lie to you. It was incredibly unapproachable. Especially me being a faithful person myself. It was a very interesting dive into something that was very challenging. But when I gave it the time, when I gave the understanding, especially when the Fantano interview showed up for this album, I grew such an appreciation for this thing to the point where this is my number 2 album of the decade now at this point. It is one of the most groundbreaking, one of the most uncomfortable, one of the most beautiful, and one of the most surprising first listens I have ever had with an album. It is indescribable of how this sounds. And the pictures in here are just really encapsulate what this sound is. I remember like I did a whole kind of speech when with this album when it comes to where this was kind of recorded around Centralia, Pennsylvania. And the idea of just being in this place where it's so like faith driven, especially in the Amish community, and you get an album like this is such an interesting like recording experience. I can only imagine. I remember also hearing too that the vocals on this are so like gaudy and they're so like standoffish. But I remember in the interview, the producer was like, "We want to keep those in," and with those like foul like vocal melodies, it makes this album sound so unsettling. And the world building that this album has is something that to behold. You need to go listen to this. I remember there was a red pressing. I got the standard white slate black vinyl, but challenge yourself and give this a listen. This is incredible music. Even though it may not be your thing, just a one-time listen to understand what this is, you're going to really enjoy this. And that is my first crate. So thank you all for watching this first little crate experience. I'm going to be doing the second part probably right now. So I'll say now that the second part will be coming out in the next couple of days to the week. I'm not going to give a very strict timeline, but expect it within the next week or so. So until then, thank you so much for watching. This is Snow Child. Thank you for giving me the time to talk about music, and I will talk to you again soon.